this is a space for folks to be creative and contribute to a community zine made by participants. So Lance and Izzy will be able to talk a little bit more about how the zine project will work, but we're Paige and Des. We have done, you may have come across us from collaborations with like RCSGD. We work with them to host a zine making club every month. And we're also involved in a couple other zine projects on campus as well. So we're super stoked to be here and talk to y'all a little bit. But that's not really what this presentation is about. What this presentation is about are zine. So what are zines, Paige? What's your first take?
What are zines? Yeah, so that's a question that we get all the time, understandably so. So we always like to talk about it, and it's cool to see how other people make zines or why they make them and stuff too. So this list is not exhaustive, but it just is our way of kind of just naming some kind of ways that you can describe what a zine is. So zines are a medium for expression, a way for you to share your story or tell people about something that's really exciting to you, or something that's not exciting to you, that you think people need to know about it. Zines are primary sources in the same way as zines are something that you create yourself and are putting out your work and your experiences out into the world. What else does?
They're interesting forms of material culture. Like one of the things that define zines is like, at its most broadly, like zines are collections of words and text that are pasted together and circulated by the zinester or author. So when you think about it like that, there's actually a lot of different materials. There's what I'm trying to say is there's a low barrier to being able to make zines, like especially e-zines. There's a lot of tools available that we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's pretty easy to just make a zine. I think a lot of folks get caught up on, and I know I did too, on like, oh, I'm not creative, like I don't draw, like I still don't draw, but I definitely make zines, And so it's thinking about, what do you have to say that's important for folks to hear? This is a really cool medium for being able to really express yourself, like Paige mentioned, and be able to like publish your work and publish your thoughts without having to go through like a scholarly like publishing house or having your words edited to mean something that you don't intend. So they're a really cool way to sort of take the power back in our narratives, especially when we spend in academic institutions so much of our time producing work that doesn't always feel like it's for us. So that's a little bit about zines. Let's move into a fast history of zines. So I like to think of zines and like going back through the history of zines and actually look at like the way that folks were using scrapbooking in the 1800s. So scrapbooking was like a super big deal around the period of the Civil War in the United States. And folks would basically cut and paste materials from other texts into scrapbooks. And a lot of times folks would add like annotations, or they would like correct obituaries, or they would provide like the actual, like what happened in a case where like a white newspaper printed like lies about something that happened, and there's actually like pages where folks would be like responding to that like for their record in their scrapbook. So building on that sort of momentum, so building on scrapbooking and thinking about how do we circulate ideas really quickly and really easily? How do we just like get ideas in people's hands? So the American Anti-Slavery Society actually pioneered a lot in this area by using their independent press to publish abolitionist pamphlets. And this was also like so controversial, like they would send sailors who were going down south with like all these pamphlets, to the point where like the Virginia House actually had to like have a meeting and be like, do we just ban these pamphlets or like what? Because like way too many folks are reading this. Anyways, dangerous material, zine application.
That's how you know you're on the right track.
Exactly. So thinking more about this, taking the narrative back and like creating a space for your voice. Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston were involved in the creation of a zine type publication called Fire. There are also a lot of social justice organizations like the Black Panthers and environmental groups that also use the sort of independent press or like printing their own works to be able to spread their image or to be able to spread their materials and actually connect with more folks. This is also something that the feminist movement adopted as well. This is an example of a full like course syllabus covering reproductive health that the Boston Women's Health Collective distributed for 75 cents to folks. And then of course, you know, like a lot of times when folks think of zines, it's usually like Riot Girl and like super white homogenous, like Olympia, Washington or like a context for it. And like, that's true. Those folks did make zines, but I think it's also important to recognize this longer history of using this format and using independent publishing to really like create new spaces for folks to communicate themselves. So that was very fast. Why even make or read zines, Paige?
Great question. Well, I think even in that fast history that you gave, and like there's pieces of that you see where I mean I'm like reading the four squares in bold on this slide. It's was a way for folks to counter dominant narratives, is a way for them to express themselves, create new knowledge. Doesn't I love to I was like, tell people to create new knowledge. You're creating new knowledge all the time. So we're just like, we want to encourage you to keep doing that. And again, zines are for everyone. Something we like to say too, or when we're sharing about zines, is that there are no rules when it comes to zine making. And, you know, even though you might see or read a zine that looks one way, that doesn't mean that your zine has to look that way too. It just, you know, it depends on you, on the way that you express yourself or the way that you think that information needs to be shared. You know, that you have full license to do that. And that's another thing that's really cool about, you know, this being a form of self-expression, and you are self-publishing that work. Yeah. I just got really hyped up, but
oh, you nailed it. So,
I'm like,
you know, thinking about what you can do with zines, and like Paige is saying, like, what do you have to say? Like, I have make some zines that are like personal narrative, where I like talk about my feelings and traumas, and then I have other ones where I just talk about pro wrestling and like how much I love pro wrestling and like how this tournament turned out or whatever, you know. So it's really like what gets you hype. And those are also like the best places to start for research in general. So like for Paige and I, like we think of both zines and like research as like kind of part of the same kind of world of really like reclaiming information use and like creating information about something based on our perspectives and our experiences. I think it's also like important to recognize that like academic institutions, especially predominantly white like institutions and the legacies that they carry, although UCSB is super diverse, it's still not easy being a diverse person at UCSB. And being able to acknowledge your own narratives and being able to speak truth to speak your own truth is something that zines can be really helpful for. And they also provide, like we were saying earlier, that sort of primary source. Like we've talked to researchers recently who are like using their own personal narratives about the experience they're researching in their research. So that's like game changing, which brings us to, zines at UCSB. So we mentioned a little earlier that the next, we do a monthly Zine-making club with RCSGD. The theme for this quarter is hopes, wishes, and dreams for next year. And basically Zine-making club is us hanging out on Zoom for a little bit and putting together pages. So you're welcome if you're interested in, if you enjoy like the sort of mix of things that are going on tonight, we welcome you to that one as well. And we're also starting a zine collection at UCSB. Paige and I are super excited to announce, and we'd really love to make sure that student voices and student works are present in the collection and are the focus of the collection. So if you're interested in contributing any of your own zines, or if you know of zines that we should get, please get in touch with us. We'll put our little information in at the end. What else we got here? Tools for making zines. We talked a little bit about this earlier, and I'll let Lance and Izzy like address this a little more, but there, even though like we can't necessarily make zines together in a room and share tools like we used to, there are still a lot of resources for making zines, which include, like, even tonight you can use physical zine pages. We recommend that folks create zine pages that are basically half the size of like a regular sheet of printer paper. Why this size, you may ask? Paige, why should it be like, why would we recommend this size?
Yeah. So even though just a couple minutes ago I was like, it can be any size you want, and now I'm like, please stick to this size. But if you, that's really only for the like reproducibility side of things. If even though you might, even though folks are going to be making this like collaborative zine together online, if and when that does actually get printed, it's much easier if it's already like in the, while it's being made, being thought of, that it's going to be printed on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, which is just the easiest and cheapest to print with.
Yeah.
And most folks, if they have a home printer, it'll probably print an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So that's just something to keep in mind too. If you're wanting to create, if you're working on a zine just for yourself, or something that is, or if you're organizing like a collaborative zine making event elsewhere, think about if you're going to be making multiple copies of that zine, how you're going to end up doing that. We do not cut and paste every single piece, every single zine that we produce. So that would be really,
That would be
rad.
ASMR. Like,
Yeah, that would be.
And you know, just to give you some examples of what other folks have done, folks also make like one-page zines, which we can show you how to do, where you basically take one sheet of paper and you fold it into a mini zine. So this is a little smaller. But folks also do like super tiny zines. This is the A to Z of uncommon phobias. So, you know, you can do whatever you want, but if you're contributing to a group zine, it's really helpful to make sure that everybody's using the same size, because the other thing too is you don't want to have your image distorted to fit the size of the page, and you don't want to cut off any of your beautiful content. So that's why it's a made up rule, but that's why we gotta say it. Anything else on tools, Paige?
I don't think so. Since tonight folks are going to mainly be using Canva, I think we're okay there too. But
I think Lance made y'all a beautiful template
yeah.
that adheres to these page things. So nice. This is us. If you have questions about zines, or if you're interested in contributing zines to the zine collection, how many times can I say zines in one sentence? We would love to talk to you. If you're interested in working with zines or making zines in and outside of this event, we would love to talk to you. We're also full like librarian folks, so we can also help you with research projects, zine related or otherwise.